game consoles of all shapes and sizes have seen more than their fair share of board game adaptations. Whether they have been simple parlour games rendered into pixels to kill time with, or more lavish representations of evergreen party favourites like Cluedo and Monopoly, they seem to tap into a reliable vein for software developers. Video games based on concepts people already know and love are apparently an easy sell, but there's still the question that begs to be addressed. What does playing an old family favourite on your computer or console offer over playing it hunched over a fancy, oversized cardboard placemat? Some games seem to be naturally riper with potential for these kinds of conversions than others though, it has to be said. And that leads us to consideration of Milton Bradley's Battleship, a title that's seen numerous such attempts to rework it for home consoles, including this monochromatic version for the Nintendo Gameboy. For the benefit of the uninitiated, Battleship is a turn-based naval strategy game for 2 players, where each is given a small number of ships and one simple aim: to sink their opponent's fleet. The twist is that neither player knows the location of the other's ships in the play area, and has to work that out via a combination of trial and error and good old-fashioned deductive reasoning. This version of the game is played on an 8x8 grid, and barring a few additional features which I'll mention later, it plays just the same as it ever did. However, translated into a portable video game, Battleship finds itself in the difficult and unenviable position of having to legitimise its own existence. That might seem like a harsh thing to say against it, but quite honestly, you can play Battleship very easily if you really want to. You don't need a Game Boy or any other game console to do it. You don't even need to buy the board game provided you have paper, pencils and a decent grasp of the rules. It's really that simple a game when you boil it down. So the question is, what can the Nintendo Game Boy version of Battleship offer players that the board game can't? And there are a few things. First of all, this version promises to deliver the almost unthinkable: single-player Battleship. Yes, it's true. If, like me, you have no friends, and you've never known the joy of an opponent's anguished wail as you rain a barrage of red plastic pegs onto their last remaining boat, the game's developers, Mindscape, have found a way to bring that magic into your life. You no longer have to feel denied. Now, if only they could help with some of those other pressing life issues, like getting a date, or finding like-minded people to hang out with, or broadening your set of life skills. But whatever, Rome wasn't built in a day. We can tackle all that scary stuff another time. Today, we'll just sink an entire flotilla of enemy warships. It's good to get your life priorities straight, is what I'm saying. But what's that I hear you say? Playing Battleship all by yourself seems wrong somehow? Or unnatural? Well, if the very notion makes you recoil in horror, you needn't fret. 2-player Battleship is perfectly possible on the Game Boy, although it's a typically convoluted proposition. You'll need another Game Boy, a link cable, and 2 game cartridges to make it happen, and another human being, Natch. Head-to-head games on Nintendo's first generation Game Boy were always a bit of a logistical nightmare to set up, and in this case, you have to wonder if the effort's really worthwhile. If you have to go to even a minimal outlay to make a 2-player game happen, well, that pencil and paper option might start to look more attractive. Sorry, but unless you've already got all the kit you'll need, playing somebody else at Battleship like this seems like a needlessly costly indulgence. It's got to do something pretty major to make the effort worthwhile. And it does try. It's been a while since I last played a tabletop version of Battleship. Decades, in fact. So, in the interests of full disclosure, I don't know if it's evolved in any way since, but there are some features in this version that I'm pretty sure weren't in the board game when I played it with my friends and family as a kid. The biggest change is that when you start each game, you're able to use a range of special attacks and abilities that are attributed to some of your ships. Your destroyer is able to unleash multiple missiles in one turn. Your battleship can launch a harpoon missile that lays down a 5-square spread of destruction. And your submarine can scan a small area of the map for enemy vessels instead of firing a shot. Used strategically, these special abilities can have a huge impact on the tide of battle, but you'll need to use careful judgment as they each have a limited number of uses per stage. As you progress through the game, additional abilities and even a new class of ship become available to use, and you'll be able to use certain attacks and abilities more frequently. It's honestly kind of neat to see that some thought's gone into these added features. And better still, they're actually useful, rather than feeling like haphazardly concocted ideas that were lobbed into the package to make it seem more attractive. Multiple missile launches are great for taking out larger enemy ships quickly, and radar scans can help you pin down more elusive vessels if you put some thought into how and when you use them. The only trouble is, for all the good these added features do, and as much as they definitely spice up a two-player game, Battleship turns out to be an inconsistent single-player experience. Playing solo, Battleship certainly does have something to offer. Watching your AI opponent's cursor jump around the grid in search of your ships can be a tense experience, and the process of pinning down the location of theirs before scoring a run of hits on them and sending them to a watery grave is quite satisfying. But the sense of excitement that comes with this fades as the flaws in the game reveal themselves. The biggest problem is the AI. It's just too haphazard, sometimes nailing your ships as though it knows exactly where you've placed them, and other times failing to score a killing blow when it's got you dead to rights. Certain patterns begin to appear that can be infuriating. For instance, any time your AI opponent uses a radar scan against you, it's odds-on guaranteed that one of your ships will be discovered. But this is offset by spells when the AI is seemingly just firing off shots wherever it feels like it. Sometimes it's absolutely merciless, and other times it couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. This has the unfortunate knock-on effect of dispelling any sense that you're making actual progress through the game. I didn't detect any changing patterns of behaviour in the AI as I advanced through its stages, and never felt like the game was getting more difficult as I went. In fact, the further I cut into the single player mode, it seemed to be less due to skill than a combination of common sense judgments and blind luck. To be fair, some of this comes down to the way Battleship works at a nuts and bolts level, regardless of whether you play it on a computer, a plastic pegboard or a late 80s handheld, or with pencils and paper. Sorry, but I'm not letting that point go. Some things are common to whichever version of the game you play on a fundamental level. For instance, a bad situation to find yourself in would be, say, if you and the enemy are both down to your last ship, but yours is a destroyer and theirs is a submarine. The sub takes up just a single square on the grid, so with no clue as to its general whereabouts, you're reduced to firing blind and hoping you get lucky. On the Game Boy, this situation is made potentially worse by the fact that the sub can scan for you using its special radar ability. If it finds you before you find it, you can pretty much call it game over. It's when these kinds of situations arise that Battleship starts to feel less like a game of wits, and more like just something you've plugged into your Game Boy to waste some time with. Your perseverance is rewarded with the aforementioned new abilities and ships as you pass certain milestones, but these are spread quite thinly throughout the game, so much so that they don't really feel like that great a reward for the time you're putting in. To be brutally honest, I think there's a lot of room for improvement here. Even though it plays an okay game of Battleship, as a package, I think it's lacking. Better, less bogus feeling AI would definitely help the single player mode, but it feels a bit lazy in other areas too. For instance, however you choose to play, you're always limited to using an 8x8 grid, where some other console versions of the game allow for a larger playing area. Maybe it's a good thing that you can't play on a larger grid though, because that might only serve to prolong tedium when a game turns into a slog, as they sometimes do when it seems like every shot you fire misses its mark. I just can't help thinking that a few extra modes of play, or maybe even some user configurable parameters, would have given this version of Battleship legs to stand on. Or tread water with. That's a nautical metaphor, right? My feelings toward Battleship on the Game Boy are conflicted to say the least. On the one hand, it seems like a rather convoluted way to play it if you want to engage with a human opponent. And on the other, its single player mode does manage to capture a good deal of what makes Battleship fun. The trouble is, I can't really see it holding the attention of solo players for too long due to its repetitive nature. There's quite a bit of it to chew through, but without any truly meaningful sense of reward or progression as you go, there's not a lot of incentive to see it through, especially once the dodgy AI announces itself and removes any notion that the game has anything as exciting as an actual difficulty curve. I suspect that, for most people, it's going to be more fun to play Battleship as was originally intended, which is to say, with somebody else, and without the incurred expense of 2 Game Boys, a link cable and 2 game cartridges. I won't say that as a video game Battleship feels completely pointless, but it certainly feels superfluous, and needs to do more than this version manages to justify the effort of converting it into software, let alone playing it for any length of time. This one's probably best left to die-hard Battleship fanatics, if such people even exist. I don't know if the game has a devoted fan base, but in this day and age everything else seems to, so nothing would surprise me. But even then, I can't shake the feeling that anybody who's really into this game would get that much from playing a digital version over the tactile delights of plastic boats and pegs. except maybe that you don't have to worry about losing tiny but essential parts of the game, like that time I accidentally hoovered up a submarine. Now there's a sentence I never thought I'd say out loud.